everyone. Welcome to the Revenue Growth Architects podcast. It's Chrissy and Charlie here. And today we're going to cover 3 topics per usual. So let's get to it. All right. So I think I like today's topic. I think it applies to everyone. Doesn't matter like what you're doing, because everyone in go-to-market ops is doing projects or doing things. And we're going to talk about, where do you go-to-market operations projects go wrong? We do a lot for different size companies. We see things go swimmingly well, and then we also see where things go maybe not so well. And we've learned our own lessons, but we also see what can go wrong for people internally. So Charlie, I want to hear from you. Where do you think go-to-market ops projects go wrong?
Well, first off, well done for being honest that not every project goes perfectly at CS2. I'd say we've got a good hit rate though.
We do.
But there are some things that end up, making a project a bit difficult. And we've got 4 on our list that we'll go through, but we might end up adding more, right? Yeah. So should we just dive through that list? So number 1 is, well, first off, one of the concepts that we kind of figured out at CS2, we call it the 3 or 4 horsemen, depending on the day. But there's a few red flags with projects when if you have all 3, the project can be really difficult. Mm-hmm. So
we call it the 4 horsemen, and it's funny because I saw something the other day. It was like 4-headed monster, 3-headed monster, or whatever, and I was like, I feel like it's more of a monster.
4-headed monster.
Just kidding, but it's that is object.
Yeah, we can rename it if you want. I'm happy, whatever. 4 horsemen of the apocalypse is kind of maybe a little bit too intense because it's not like it. Yeah, anyway, moving on. So the point is, there's a few key categories that if you're someone who works for an agency or if you're someone who works internally in operations, like look out for these things because you don't want all 3, okay?
Yeah.
And the number 4 on this list is a bit more specific if you are an agency. So number 1 is there is a high level of team complexity. Mm-hmm. So this could be you're a big company where there's a lot of stakeholders involved in the project that you're about to work on. It could even mean you're a small company, but there's a few very opinionated people involved in the project that are going to potentially create a lot of issues getting alignment and getting some decisions made. Or it could be you don't have an internal operations lead who is a leader, who is both strategic, technical, and good at project management. Mm-hmm. So someone who's going to shepherd this project through, even if you have an agency partner like CS2, that is very important internally. Someone that understands what's happening, can shepherd the project through all the stages internally, can do a lot of the behind the scenes work. So number 1, team complexity, and there are a few of the things to look for. Number 2 is your just general tech stack, data, process complexity, right? Is your Salesforce org a shit show? Do you have a ton of automation? Do you have a lot of processes that are all dependent on each other? Like your reporting is dependent on all of these different processes to work in the right order. And if you tear one thing out, it breaks another thing. You might have this general feeling of every time I pull a string in a certain direction, I'm trying to uncover one thing. I enter the rabbit hole and I uncover 100 things. Every person in ops has had that feeling, probably. It doesn't matter how complex, but you know it if you really are uncomfortable with the foundation that you've got, and you're just like, this is a brittle ecosystem that's incredibly complicated. Yeah, that's number 2.
And then they're not really familiar with is also hard.
There's no one that's like.
There's not documented. All the people that did it was gone.
Yeah. And that can come back to the team complexity too. Yeah. Where maybe there's been a lot of turnover, there's new people, etc. So number 3, this is where the scope of what you're trying to work on is really big and wide-ranging and touches a lot of different people and teams and tools and systems and processes, and you're trying to solve a lot at once. Yeah. Right? Number 4, like I said, is a bit more focused for the agency side. It's like, okay, but maybe it's relevant for some people. Is you don't have a big budget, right?
Yeah, but that's also can be there's not enough resources, team,
right,
internally to actually execute.
You don't have the team internally. That it's kind of a little
like
bit
the
related to
ratio is
team
off,
size.
right? Between the people operating versus the people that are doing good market like activities, like sales and marketers. So
yeah. So, but taking maybe the budget side out of it a little bit, those first three, so team complexity, tech, process, tool complexity, and scope complexity. If you have all of those three, that is a very high risk project.
Yeah.
And
so I think some people listening might be like, well, that's just the nature of my business that I'm in right now. And I don't want my go-to-market projects to go wrong.
Right.
So how do you combat that?
This is where you need to identify those three things.
Yeah.
And try and find some breathing room on one of them. Mm-hmm. So generally,
you can't have all four, and let's say four too, because I think the having enough people to execute is a big one.
But the four in our world is more around like agency resources and budget.
Right.
So like, because otherwise, kind of, if you bring in the people side, that's kind of like number one too. The people complexity.
That's true.
So the thing is, even if you have a large budget, so say you've got a really complicated, massive team, you're trying to take on a massive scope, and you've got a massive kind of shit show monster of systems. Mm-hmm. Number four, the budget. You're going to need a huge multi-$100,000 budget, to be able to deal with all of that.
Yeah.
Now, so I think that's an interesting thing to talk about on the budget. But what I want to focus on for internal people, where I think is a bit more useful, is trying to find a way to reduce one of the first three.
Yeah.
So say, for example, you've worked for a bigger company. It's really complicated, tons of stakeholders. And maybe because of that, you've got really old systems and there's a lot going on. Mm-hmm. You probably have to find a way to simplify the scope.
Yeah.
Or spread the scope out over a longer period of time. So if we take those two examples, so sometimes you might be like, we want to do new reporting. And to do new reporting, we need our new foundation. And for our new foundation, we need to fix our sales process. We need to fix our UTM capture, our lead sourcing. We need to train all of our team, our data capture, our data flow through our systems, our integrate, like all of this and our scoring and our campaign structure. And it turns into this is like, okay, we're basically doing everything, right?
Yeah.
Our recommendation would be...
I would say even there, like a big learning that I've learned from being in this for 15 plus years is like, even when you try to think of like what all the things involved would be, you're underestimating.
There's more. Yeah.
There's way more.
There's more dependencies than you think.
So if you already have a feeling that there's too much, there's way too much. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the goal would be try and reduce that scope or spread it out, right?
Spread it out, yeah.
Try and take on some of those more foundational projects. And this can be hard sometimes because there's so many dependencies between things. It's like, well, if I do this, then I have to do this. It's kind of like remodeling a house. You're like, okay, I want to do my kitchen, but to do my kitchen, I need to do my entryway. And if I do my entryway, that means I kind of need to do the bathroom off the entryway. And if I do that, then my front door needs to change. And if I do my front door, I need to do my driveway. And it just turns into just
I should have just knocked down the whole thing.
Right. Well, okay. So, and now that is actually one way that you can sometimes reduce the complexity. Mm-hmm. It is so much easier. Well, actually, I'm going to rephrase this. It can be easier to just start again than retrofit. It's like a house remodel, right? You lose a lot sometimes when you kind of start from scratch. But if you take a house remodel as an example, what we're often trying to do in these really complex go-to-market ops projects is like remodel this huge house with all these people living in it that are reliant on things
that don't want to move
while they're living in it, right? And no one's moving out. Like that's what makes it really hard. And
don't bother them either.
Yeah, and you have to make it seamless. Like, they can just, they're all working from home and their kids are at home. It's just like, okay, it's really difficult. But, there is an option that you can, like we have some clients right now that are just like, okay, we're just going to implement a new Salesforce and Marketo, right?
Yeah, and it has worked better. Honestly.
It is easier because the rest of the stuff can kind of carry on. You're building this whole new kind of perfect ecosystem over here. It does get painful when you move people into it. There are some things with the data that you lose.
Yeah.
Just like random things like Salesforce, campaign membership. You can't like change the responded date. So maybe you need like a custom field for the responded date. So there's like a little weird technical things like that, but it's just something to think about.
I will say like, if companies are being really honest with themselves, and I'm one person who I'm like, I want history and I want to be able, most companies are not looking back that far on their data.
Yeah, and there's ways you can get around it. Like particularly if you're that big of a company, maybe, put it in data lake warehouse. And,
there's ways around it. I will say one thing here too. If you're struggling, if you want to do both, but you want to take a slow approach, and I did this with a client recently, is to also identify like 2 different work streams and then build those into slower phases. So one of those is like a business process change work stream where you need to involve more people, and it's like big changes that everyone needs to like be aligned on, make decisions on, and you need more people involved. And then you have another work stream which is maybe more tied to just like, what can my like MOPS and SOPs or RevOps team just execute well without it being like a huge impact on the business or everything else, the whole go-to-market team. And I think doing that too is good, because you can at least get started on that one work stream and it can move faster, while and those are dependencies on the things that are maybe going to move slower that you need everyone to get aligned on. And I think communicating that is really key too, because then at least like your key stakeholders know that you're not just like not going to do anything while you're just spinning your wheels, or everyone's spinning their wheels. Like you're actually going to see if you can make progress. And that's what it kind of feels like when you're in that type of situation. You're just taking this big boulder and moving it up, but like, can you actually just turn that boulder into like, 2 different or 3 different, rocks, and have them moving up maybe at different points, but you're more likely to get to that end spot at some point, instead of just like never being able to.
It's like, I want to remodel my whole house, but I'm going to start with my bathroom, finish that. Then I'm going to do my kitchen, finish that. Then I'm going to do my other bathroom. It's like, you're not doing it all at once, and everyone can kind of like move into this part of the house for a bit and then move into that part of the house and then get trained on how to use this other part of the house. Like, it definitely splitting it up. But I think
you have wins. Like, I think the thing here is like, you need to have like some
momentum,
wins.
gather momentum.
Because you're going to lose your team too if they're just waiting around to like see things come to fruition.
That's like if it takes so long sometimes to get these projects, like there's turnover, not just because it's taking so long, but like just the normal turnover, and that can create a lot of issues. We saw that with one client recently.
Yeah.
So, but the one thing that's important to call out here is you have levers across maybe all 4, but like let's focus on all those 3 things, right? So say you are tasked with this monster scope. You can't change that now, and you've got a very complicated team, and you have a very complicated org, like tech, process, data, etc. You're going to have to find somewhere to mitigate some of this risk. Now, if your systems are very complicated, that's part of the project probably to fix that.
Yeah.
So you can't, just have that magically happen. So the place you have to focus on is on the team side. Now, on the team side, some of the levers that you have, or some of the risks that I would really want to call out here, you need, like I mentioned at the beginning, you need someone who's going to be like the lead, who's technical, strategic, knows all the people involved, and can really see this project through the details and through all of the development stages of the project.
Yeah.
And even if you have an agency partner or not, but our best, most successful projects are not when CS2 is just like doing everything, and you kind of like the client like moves out of their house and you move in and redo it, and then they move back in. It's not that show. What was that show where people like
Extreme
get that
home makeover?
Yeah, whatever. It's not that. No, it's when we're partnering.
They do it in like weekend.
Yeah, exactly. It's probably all crappy, but anyway. But you're partnering together on the project, and we have a really strong internal stakeholder that's going to help us through all of the complexity.
Yeah.
And I think even if you have an agency or not, you need that person.
Yeah.
And then that person needs to assign each of those key work streams, because you're doing a monster scope. There's probably could be a dozen work streams happening at once. Each of those work streams needs a lead, and you probably need some kind of RACI model on knowing who's responsible, accountable, etc. And everyone needs to be clear on it. And you need excellent project management, really clear project management, and really good communication. So you need to lean big into the soft skills and those areas of the project, and that's the only way a really big scope with a really complicated system is going to be successful.
Yeah.
If you don't have that internally, you need to call it out as a massive red flag, and then you need to figure out, okay, can we reduce the scope? Like something has to give, because if you can't get those people in the right place and you're taking on this monster scope and you have this crazy system, it's going to be really difficult for this to be a successful project for everyone. And it's just going to be a sufferfest for everyone for months.
Yeah. I think communication is key. Early communication, identifying like risks, making sure that anyone who could be affected has been on board from the start, is educated. I think people don't realize like how much education on what is changing needs to be done, and everyone needs to sign off on it. Like there's been so many times, literally, even when someone's been on calls the whole entire time, we've seen it last minute, mile 25, someone's like, whoa, wait.
What are we
That's not what I wanted.
Yeah,
and it's like,
I know.
Dude, you've been here on this whole time. Like, why did so? Literally, that could be
that's someone that's been there the whole time. There's
Imagine
like so many
the people
instances,
that you didn't involve.
And this is where the team is, like, if you're like IT owned Salesforce or something, and this is a marketing led project, and you're doing all this stuff, and then right at the last minute you throw it over to IT, and they're just like, what the like, what are you doing? Like, why?
Yeah.
Bring them in earlier. Like,
bring everyone
all
in
of those
early.
stakeholders
like,
in.
Honestly, have a marketing campaign almost like you're doing for these projects. Like, communicate, educate, show the before and after, really sell the vision, literally making someone sign off on it. These are all things that can help. And if that's not your strong suit, maybe figure out like someone around you who can help you shepherd, or who can give you advice on what communication formats like matter, how like, and figure out something that's going to work for you, but that works for other people too. Like sending out like just like a deck or something to people and making sure they saw your email is not enough. Like it needs to be thinking about the user experience and like how they're going to take in that information, how they can communicate back to you to feel like everyone is on the same page and so forth.
Yeah, we've talked for years about how the soft skills are really important for an ops person who wants to move up the ranks. We probably haven't talked enough about project management being one of those skills. I think once you get into a leadership position in ops, it's particularly where you're at a decent sized org, you have to be really good at project management because these projects are honestly sometimes as complicated as I think that a project can get, right? You might have 24 people that need to be kind of brought in and looped in, opinions handled and kind of kept up to date. You might have hundreds of people who get impacted by this, right? You're doing a new sales process, you're implementing a new marketing process. There could literally be hundreds of people whose jobs change when you implement that. Yeah. And you need to do impact analysis, training, figuring out how to get them enabled, etc. And all of this is going to be very painful if you don't have project management skills. So honestly, I feel like we're learning this in real time, at CS2, how we need to constantly be improving project management at our company as well. But I would recommend go out there, find a course, read about it, build a framework. If you're a lead in ops, really think about your project management framework, like your weekly call schedules, what the tools that you're using, how you get building in maybe a RACI framework or something like that to be able to get people structured in the right way to be able to get this work done. Lean into it in a big way because people notice project management deficiencies way before they notice technical issues, right? Because some of these projects that we're working on these days, they're like 6, 7, 8 month projects, right? And you don't actually see anything new in the systems maybe until month 6 for some of them. I mean, not all of our work. A lot of our work's a lot quicker than that. But we've got a few projects going on that are multi-month projects at least. And our clients will always pick up more on just kind of how the project's being run, right? Way before they see all of the great technical work that we've done at the end, because they don't see that until the end. So, and then that's your moment to kind of win or lose people is on the project management and just the way that you're working that project. And this is where that people piece, you should be leaning into it anyway. But if you have like very complicated team, very complicated systems, and a really complicated scope, you have to be all over it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Is there anything else that folks can do to make sure their go-to-market ops projects don't go wrong?
I mean, there's a few kind of just top of mind things here. So like related to the people thing, committee, death by committee is a thing.
Yeah, 100%.
This is why the RACI framework's important.
Yeah.
If you have a dozen people that need to be, consulted or informed about something, but maybe they're not like find the person who's going to be accountable and responsible who can like make that decision.
Yeah.
Because, we've seen situations where we're like things like what the stages should be, like how we should be handling stage 0 opportunities for clients, where like you literally can go in kind of circles and circles and circles while, these 3 people need to be like kind of looped in and they all have an opinion and that conflicts with these other people. Like, but like, no, if there's no like leadership there to be like, no, this is how we're going to do it, and everyone kind of fall in line, you can just spin in circles, like kind of infinitely, honestly.
Yeah, it's hard because psychologically, like everyone wants to have an opinion, but a lot of times people don't want to make a decision.
Oh yeah.
So
oh my God, yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
Like, so you can like don't think that like because you're involving more people, you might get to a better decision. You're just going to have more conflicting opinions. Like,
I mean, involve them, but you need someone.
But then
who's
someone
going to make a decision.
Exactly, you need to have someone make a decision, and you can't please everyone.
Right.
Like.
Yeah, and then some of the other notes I had here were just like in general the project management at comms, like we talked about. So one of the things that we like to do at CS2 is that every week, give each client an update on everything that we're working on. So if you had a big project going on, like have a Slack channel for that project, send a weekly update. What's at risk? Well, the way ours is structured is like what we completed last week, what we're working on this week, what we're waiting on, and any risks. Mm-hmm. To be really clear with everyone about risks, because what you don't want is to be kind of marching towards this deadline where like you're nowhere near ready and you're just going to fall off this cliff, but everyone's just kind of like walking towards the cliff and you're just hoping that a bridge is just going to like magically appear and take us to the other side of the Grand Canyon. Those bridges do not appear, you just fall off the cliff. Mm-hmm. So, call out those risks loud and often so everyone knows. And then if you have to shift the dates on things, then everyone's like, oh yeah, of course. Like you've been letting us know about that this was waiting on a risk for like 2 months and we still didn't make a decision on XYZ. Of course, we have to push the date.
Yeah.
As opposed to just like kind of trying to power through and be the hero and not let anyone know. And then you're 2 weeks before when everyone thinks you're going to deploy and you're like, oh, well, by the way, like you guys haven't made a decision on this. Now we have to push. They're like, well, why didn't you tell us this like 2 months ago that would be a reason to push? Because in ops, we kind of underappreciate how complicated everything is, and like we understand it and all the dependencies and the steps and everything. We need to appreciate that a lot of other people who are involved in the project do not understand that.
Yeah.
And they don't understand, we don't make this decision. Of course we have to push. Like, we understand that instinctively. They might not.
Yeah.
So make it very clear. And then, everything else we talked about.
Yeah. I think maybe the final thing to say on this is like, you notice that a lot of the things that make the projects go wrong are not like we chose the wrong tool, we didn't solution it well enough. Like that's the easy part is like figuring out what solution.
Not easy. But
not the easy part, you know what I mean? But like, it's not always the part that really goes wrong. It can be a lot of the time, but like, wrong
you need
solution
the right
was, and then a Band-Aid was put in. But like, say you have the right tech, the right solution, all that kind of stuff. It's really how you can just work with these dynamics of like people and the environment that is so hard to plan for.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Yep.
Yeah. So next
GTM or GTFO, if you're first listening to this is where one of us brings a usually like an actual tangible thing, like a post or a video or something for the other person to react to. Chrissy has a LinkedIn post for me to look at, so we'll throw that up on the screen now, the post, and I'm going to read it out for those people who are listening. So it's by the chief evangelist at Demandbase, Chris Moody. So need some handy stats for a marketing deck. Like 81% of organizations see higher ROI with ABM programs kind of stuff. Here is my 5 favorite stats today. 53% of account-based opportunities become deals compared to 19% of lead-based ops. Topo is never going away. Stage-by-stage conversion is my jam, and this was always the row I highlighted. ABM isn't easy, but it works. Get those account-based ops, friends. Renewal rates are 33% higher when using account-based ads. Demand-based uncovered this one in this State of B2B Advertising report. Engagement increase. I'm skipping a little bit over.
Yeah, I think just
engagement increases 3.9% with personalized experiences. 81% of orgs see higher ROI with ABM programs. That's from a Momentum study in 2024. 48% of leaders say ABM enriches all marketing activities. Account-based is the tide that raises all boats, improves your lead and demanding efforts too, etc. That's from an ABM benchmark. Doesn't say who did that study. So yeah, I guess there's a lot to maybe unpack here.
I think the overall consensus is like ABM makes everything better.
So first off, I think I have to call out. This isn't calling out Chris or anything, but I mean, his title is Chief Evangelist at an ABM company. So first off, he's doing his job, right?
Yeah.
He's doing his job. He's finding stats to evangelize ABM. So you definitely can't criticize that. Now, let's maybe break these down one by one. So 53% of account-based opportunities become deals compared to 19% of lead-based ops. Doesn't say where that stat came from. I wonder if that comes from demand-based.
The thing that I'm like, so does that just mean having a deal with one person versus having like multiple contact roles? And how is that ABM?
Yeah, I don't know what that means. I mean, maybe it means like, okay, we have an account funnel. We sent this account to sales, and those, opportunities within that account will convert. Well, what's that? What's actually account-based opportunities become deals? Actually, what does that even mean? Actually?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Account-based opportunities become one customers would make more sense. Like a 53% win rate. Well, that would be very high, but that would make more sense. But isn't an opportunity a deal? I mean, that's what I think, right? Opportunity / deal is the same thing.
Maybe it's like in pipeline versus not pipeline.
But account-based opportunities become pipeline compared to 19% of lead-based ops. Yeah, so actually that's a good point. I have no idea actually what that statement means thinking about it, because I would say a deal is the same thing as an opportunity. Maybe it means we have like pre-pipeline. Yeah, we have like stage 0 opportunities, pre-pipeline up turns into pipeline up. Maybe he actually meant
customers.
Yeah, become customers. That would maybe make a bit more sense, because like 19% of lead-based ops, I mean, there's always been that stat. It's like kind of get to a 4x pipeline coverage because you're going to have a 25% win rate. So maybe the 19% of lead-based ops is kind of like there or thereabouts, like industry standard-ish, and then you're going to get 53% win rate for account-based ops. So maybe putting that aside, if it is that, I still think there's kind of a valid question on, well, one, who did the study, right? If demand-based did it, obviously it can be a little bit self-serving. But then two, what does it actually mean? Like what is an account-based op versus a lead-based op? Is it, what I said, where you got that? Then I think maybe there's something to it, right? If you're sending an account to sales where maybe there's a few contacts in there for the salesperson to strategically work, maybe the one person that's showing actual intent in the time, plus multiple other people that they're going to multi-thread and all of that, that probably does give you a better chance at winning an opportunity. Although, and I'm a fan of ABM. I mean, ABM to me is just smart. It's just like kind of, we've been doing ABM. A little bit of backstory, me and Chrissy, we kind of like met on an ABM project like 12 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So like we definitely are a believer in an account. We call it more account-based ops, right? Like making sure that you have good account-based ops, and maybe account-based marketing is like true one-to-one. But account-based ops, everyone needs it. So if you are trying to like, even if you do a lead-based funnel, you should still have kind of an account lens on that. So when a lead comes in, it's matched to an account, they can convert it into the account, then they can still work the account. Like that's just smart sales, right? Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it's probably doubling a win rate. I'm sure there's kind of statistics are very much, up for kind of interpretation, like in different ways. And like you could look at the data and go, oh, this was a lead based off, this was an account based off. What if it was a lead that then got converted into account and then they kind of like worked the account, but it actually originated as a lead? Are they including that account base? So you know what I mean? This is what ops people go through in their mind. Like these things get way too complicated. So anyway, that's kind of
for sake of time we go through.
Yeah, sorry, I went on a bit of a rant there.
Yeah, but no,
okay.
it's fair. Yeah.
I mean, I think that was just maybe like my reaction that's kind of a confusing stat a little bit.
I think like my whole thing is like the rest of the ones like are a little bit confusing because you're like, well, is it the account-based marketing that got you that result, or is it just because you're doing better targeting, which is what we're already like always talk about, like.
Yeah. So the next one, renewal rates are 33% higher when using account-based ads. Now, this one was a demand-based report. So, okay, I mean, I don't want to say that you're going to, fudge the numbers, but like, of course, they're not going to come out and say renewal rates were worse when using account-based ads. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? I mean,
I think it's good to do account-based ads.
To your customers.
I mean, it's more people are going to see it, but
like, so if okay, let's go through an example. We use Notion. Okay. Yeah. Are you going to renew with Notion because you saw an ad?
No.
Are you going to renew? We use ClickUp for project management. Are you going to renew with ClickUp because you saw an ad?
No. But there might be correlation between like.
Yeah, there could be correlation, but is there causation is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. That's what I think here is like, actually it's probably more correlation. And if anything, it just like maybe is further instilling that product as like a leader to that company, especially someone who's not like an end user or something like that. But I don't know if it'll make them renew. But
yeah, I think I'd want to see like their take on why that's important. Because to me instinctively, it doesn't seem like you're going to renew or not renew based on kind of like your true usage of the product, right? I mean, that's going to be the thing that really shifts things.
Yeah.
Engagement increases 3.9% with personalized experiences. Yeah, I mean, probably seems fair. Like if you're personalizing something, there's probably going to be a bit more engagement, right? 4x is quite a high amount of improved engagement, but.
Well, we talk about this though sometimes where is it the personalization and what kind of personalization?
Yeah, we've talked about email personalization. Is it better? But I'm imagining kind of like web personalization, or like that kind of thing. Like you come to the website and it's kind of showing you, more of what you're interested in.
Yeah,
I could see that having higher engagement.
That's fair.
81% of orgs see higher ROI with ABM programs. Okay, well, first off, actually, our next question is going to be about ROI. ROI is really bloody hard to report on, actually.
Yeah, so who are the two companies that were able to provide that data?
Oh, my God. Yeah, that's so true. So, yeah, I want to see this ROI data because it's actually really hard to like nail down ROI at a campaign level. Like you can get like total ROI, right? Like how much did we spend on marketing and sales and like how much revenue do we get? But getting it down to like an ABM program level, that's very difficult. Not impossible, but difficult. So I would like to actually see the underlying data there before I believe it. Last one. 48% of leaders say ABM enriches all marketing activities.
Isn't the ABM the marketing activities, or?
Yeah, they're saying like if you do account-based ads, like it's going to kind of make everything else better. This is where maybe our perspective on ABM is a bit different, right? Like ABM, true ABM, one-to-one, it's really trying to focus on the handful of accounts that are going to completely change your business. I mean, 48% is actually less than half as well. So does that mean 52% of leaders say ABM doesn't enrich their marketing activity? Yeah. I don't know. Again, some of this stuff, they do actually have a whole
I think,
doc here with maybe a bit more detail in this potentially. So
I think with anything, like, it's hard when you're just like putting stats out there, but I will say, like, that's kind of what LinkedIn is these days, just like put like information out there. I think my worry as well is, like he's saying, you want to put these into a deck to show people the power of ABM. And I don't know if these are really selling ABM because they're not giving enough detail of like how and why. And I think people need to realize, like, you need to show the like how or why it's going to do that. So if I take it just purely from his headline of like what to do, I don't know if just including stats is the way to like sell ABM to your org. I think yes, it can, but showing true examples of like how and what that looks like for a company is better.
Totally, yeah. I think people are very skeptical, right?
Yeah.
Or at least I feel quite skeptical of just any number anyone throws at me.
I'm just skeptical in general.
So GTM or GTFO? I always feel bad saying GTFO because, like, you know,
he has some valid points.
Yeah,
but I think you need to follow it up with like how, or also some of them are a bit questionable, like the last one.
I would say some are a little bit, come on, GTFO, like really? And then some are like, yeah, GTM. I mean, you know, probably in personalized experiences do improve things. Renewal rates, not sure. I don't even know what the first one means. Like, really, I'd love to actually get like the actual detail there. ROI one, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, show me the 2 orgs that actually can accurately get ROI down to the campaign level. And then 52% of leaders think ABM does not enrich all marketing activities. It's like, so yeah.
So my thing for people who are actually maybe going through this, I think go look for this examples and data within your own org. Don't look at other orgs and general stats and benchmarks. I do feel like those are useless. So go look at your sales deals and see when, you know, do a comparison between opportunities that had like one contact role versus multiple contact roles. What was the velocity? What was your win rate? That's a good one to show like an account base, or when you had multiple people at that account, if they're more likely to close. I think also do a test if you haven't even done any kind of account-based ads versus running like a cohort of just, you know, ones that weren't targeted by your accounts and named accounts, and compare, you know, take some of these learnings and stats and see how those apply to your company.
Totally. And just to call out, we're fans of account-based, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Whether we're more on like the account-based ops, like have a good account structure, you know, help your sales team work accounts, etc.
Yeah.
So we're definitely not coming at this from a skeptical of like account-based is pointless. No. It's just more like, yeah, take stats with a bit of a pinch of salt, and like you said, figure it all out. Just figure out how it's working for you.
Yeah.
So 5 minutes to talk about ROI. That's enough time, isn't it?
Yeah.
So last one, this is where we do a question from one of our clients recently. Was a really good one, and it's related to what we were just talking about. How do you get ROI reporting at the campaign level? And then in this context, the campaign means a little bit of 2 things. One, your offer. So think about Salesforce campaign. You know, your event, your online event, etc. Any of those 2 kind of offers, and then relative to also, you know, the channels driving conversions on those offers. But then also from maybe like a parent campaign, like we're doing this group of initiatives around something. How can we get ROI on that? So you have 4 minutes to break it down.
Well, one is really tricky when you're trying to just maybe facilitate like a Salesforce campaign structure for getting ROI. This is one of the things that we posed even to ourselves, because we find there's this, you know, there's 2 things that like companies struggle with in terms of picking their Salesforce campaign structure. It's like, do you go the way that takes a shitload of time in campaigns where you're literally building out, you take your offer and you have your offer channel, so you can actually allocate cost well enough.
And for those, if you want to allocate cost by a time period in that Salesforce campaign, you have to recreate all of those campaigns
by time period.
If it's like every month you want to see that, you have to recreate hundreds of campaigns every single month, right?
Yeah. And we have clients that do that, and it like kind of they want to rip their hair out. The second thing is also if you want to go the simplified way, then you just have a general offer campaign that then you would track your UTMs on the campaign members, see what channel they came from. Again, there isn't a sense really of time except for when they became part of that campaign. But then how do you allocate cost, right? Mm-hmm. Like where do you put then the cost that's tied to that? And so and then there's so that's like the structure in terms of like how you can,
on the responses side,
how you can allocate cost. And then, the struggle of like, well, how in general, then like, how am I tracking the cost of like channels? And then there is how do I then also like, which responses do I try and like what revenue? Like how do I get the revenue to tie to those mm-hmm. responses? Is it just first touch attribution? Is it the multi-touch? And then is it linear? Is it last touch? Tipping point?
All have pros and cons.
And some people will try to do a little bit of both, which is also very confusing for an org. And then if you're doing multi-touch attribution, depending on what you consider a touch point, can dilute everything. Because not only are you diluting the touch points, you're also diluting it by channel. And so then you're looking at the data and you're like, well, how do I make sense of this? Because the ROI is going to look like pennies, but across the board. And so, so for everyone who's thinking, ROI is, just simple. You just take, revenue minus cost divided by cost. It's like, no. It's actually very complicated when you're trying to get it down to a campaign. So we were having a conversation and brainstorm because we're like, okay, we need to draw a line in the sand for clients to demystify it. And I don't know.
We probably need a long, maybe next podcast we'll do a whole section on it because we probably need to dig into it a lot more. So first thing I'll say is it's hard, really hard to get it down at the campaign level. Getting it from the total level, like I mentioned in the ABM side, not that hard, right? You have your total cost and you have your total revenue and you kind of figure it out from there.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to figure out like, how do we get down to that next level, you open up this huge can of worms of, okay, how do we know how much revenue is actually coming from each campaign?
And revenue is a lagging indicator.
It takes a while, yeah.
And a lot of the time what people are trying to do is look at, okay, revenue from this quarter compared to cost.
Well, that's another whole massive complication, right? But like even just getting how much revenue you can get from a campaign is a very complicated question, right? Because like you said, are you using like first touch, last touch, tipping point attribution, or are you doing multi-touch? Mm-hmm. Each of those, the choice you make there on how you attribute revenue to a campaign, which is obviously what you need to do as first step in ROI reporting, is a massive decision. Because say you use tipping point, now all of your marketers who do more pipeline acceleration campaigns are going to be pissed off because their campaigns are going to not show ROI. If you do multi-touch and kind of a linear where you give, you split out the opportunity value equally across all of the touch points, there's a lot of dilution, and then like your high volume touch points maybe get the lion's share of everything, right? So that is a very big decision, right? Mm-hmm. So I think you have to weigh things like, okay, what type of marketing we're doing? If we're like a really early stage startup and basically everything that we're doing is to try and like drive new leads, then maybe you do tipping point. If you're like a bit of a
tipping point,
tipping point meaning like the source of what drove them to sales, right? Mm-hmm. Like kind of an MQL source or a sales ready source. Mm-hmm. If you're a much bigger org, you're doing lots of marketing across the whole life cycle, you probably won't want to lean more towards multi-touch linear, even if it is more complicated. So that's one thing.
But then being really clear around what touch points like you're including, like maybe not including
sales touch points.
Sales touch points or like an email click, which is some things we see.
Exactly. Yeah. So don't dilute it even further.
Right.
And then the other side of the equation is costs.
Yeah.
So what you also need to do is figure out with your finance team or others is how are we allocating all of these costs to campaigns as well? Because essentially what you need is two different databases, one that has cost per campaign or channel, and you're going to have to break that down in a certain way. And then the other side, you need revenue by campaign channel.
Yeah.
And then you need to be able to match those things together. So you mentioned creating loads of Salesforce campaigns. That's one way that you could do it, because you can put a cost in a campaign, but you have to create multiple campaigns for all the time periods and then all of the channel offer combinations. One way you can do it is you have the two databases and you just kind of bring them together in an Excel file. That's probably like step one. Like, get all of your revenue by campaign and offer, and also campaign and channel, and then go get all your cost data, bring it into a sheet, line it all up, and now you can get those calculations. That's kind of step one. Or you can create custom objects, in Salesforce. You could get data in like a web data warehouse and use a BI tool to do all of it. But essentially, you have to have obviously both sides of those equations, and you have to really think through a way to match them together, right? So like on the cost side, you might have a cost for paid ads in March, but on the Salesforce response tracking and attribution side, you might have those paid ads all broken out by multiple campaigns or like multiple different offers. So you need to figure out, how do I group that all into one row, so then I can just get like a apples to apples, like this is how much spent on paid ads and this is how much revenue we got out of it. So we'll do more podcasts on this, but there are a few things to think about, like what model you're going to choose to attribute revenue to each of the kind of cost categories.
Yeah.
How are you categorizing costs with finance? How do you get a link between those two things with that cost category, so you can understand like how to link them, so you can say, well, this is the revenue that came from this amount of budget. And, probably early on, that's maybe happening manually. And then you can grow into having something a bit more automated. But probably what I would recommend isn't trying to have it all perfectly automated from the beginning, like having all those costs in Salesforce and having like having to do all of those Salesforce campaigns.
Yeah.
So some things to think about. It's really hard though. It's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Companies are like, oh, we don't know how to, like, I don't blame them.
I would focus even before ROI.
Like, I was just getting good.
I would just try and get first good funnel lifecycle data.
Yeah.
Figure out what's happening at the tipping point, what's tipping over to sales, so you can optimize what you're sending to sales and what's converting through into pipeline. Get some good, solid campaign response data, and use a multi-touch attribution tool or data model in Salesforce to be able to see all of the touch points, start analyzing that. Exhaust those two things, and then you can start getting into all these ROI. But some people go straight to ROI, but you can't even see what your conversion rates are in your funnel, or you don't even have good data on any of the responses. And you're nowhere near ROI reporting.
Yeah, and then if you are doing the multi-touch attribution, I think knowing that things are a lagging indicator, I think getting to like a first half or like a year-long like kind of data, looking at how much you spent in a certain channel for that year, and then looking at how much revenue you got from that channel within a year. It's not going to be perfect, but if you're just starting out, I think that could be really telling too, because like content syndication, you might spend $1 million, but maybe you only got like 50 grand, So, hey, that's a good sign. So at least approaching it, I think by a channel, at least gives you directional data in terms of like what channels to invest in. And then you can maybe dig into your campaigns and look at, okay, well, which campaigns actually drove that revenue and then which ones didn't.
Yep.
Like that's a very simplified way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Still hard.
But yeah.
Simpler.
Simpler. All right. Well,
there we have it.
We really got into things. It's fun.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for joining. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to share it with a colleague or friend, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.